What if I told you that the worst thing that ever happened to you might actually be the beginning of your greatest story? That's the life of Joseph. He was betrayed, sold into slavery, falsely accused and forgotten in prison. But in the end, he didn't just survive, he saved nations. Joseph's story is more than just a tale from ancient history. It's a powerful reminder that even when life feels unfair, even when people let you down or your dreams seem delayed, God is still working behind the scenes. This is the incredible journey of Joseph, how a dreamer became a ruler, how betrayal became breakthrough, and how forgiveness triumphed over revenge. Joseph was born into a complicated family. His father, Jacob, also known as Israel, had 12 sons, but Joseph was his favorite. Why? Because Joseph was the firstborn son of Rachel, the woman Jacob loved most. Jacob didn't hide his favoritism either. He gave Joseph a richly decorated coat, a symbol of special love and status. Some call it the coat of many colors. But Joseph had more than just a fancy coat. He had dreams, literal dreams. In one dream, Joseph saw himself and his brothers binding sheaves of grain, and suddenly their sheaves bowed down to his. In another, the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed to him. Joseph shared these dreams with his family. Big mistake. His brothers were already jealous of his coat. Now he was saying they would bow to him. They hated him for it. Even his father was unsettled. And then, one day, things exploded. Joseph's brothers were out tending their father's flocks, and Jacob sent Joseph to check on them. When the brothers saw him coming, they didn't see a sibling. They saw a threat. "Here comes that dreamer," they sneered. And right there, they made a plan to kill him. But Reuben, the oldest, convinced them not to. Instead, they threw Joseph into a pit, an empty cistern, and left him there. Later, they saw a caravan of traders heading to Egypt. So they pulled Joseph out of the pit and sold him as a slave for 20 pieces of silver. Joseph was taken away in chains. The brothers dipped his coat in goat's blood and brought it back to Jacob. When their father saw it, he believed Joseph had been killed by wild animals. He wept bitterly, and just like that, the dreamer disappeared from his father's world. But Joseph's story was far from over. In Egypt, Joseph was sold to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. It could have been the end of him. But God was with Joseph. Joseph worked hard. He was honest, diligent, and wise. Potiphar noticed. He promoted Joseph and put him in charge of his entire household. Joseph, once a slave, was now running a powerful man's estate. But trouble was brewing again. Potiphar's wife took notice of Joseph. The Bible says he was well-built and handsome. She tried to seduce him day after day, but Joseph refused. He respected Potiphar, and he feared God. One day, she grabbed his cloak and tried to force him. Joseph ran, but she kept the cloak and used it to frame him. She accused Joseph of assault. Potiphar believed her and had Joseph thrown in prison. Once again, Joseph was punished for doing the right thing. But even in prison, God wasn't done. You know, it's easy to think that doing the right thing should always lead to good outcomes. But sometimes you do everything right and still end up in the pit. Joseph could have given up. He could have become bitter, but he didn't. Because sometimes the pit is the pathway, and what feels like a setback is actually setting you up for something greater. God was still with Joseph, and the story wasn't over yet. In prison, Joseph kept doing what he did best, working faithfully. The prison warden saw it. He put Joseph in charge of the other prisoners. One day, 2 of Pharaoh's officials, the cupbearer and the baker, were thrown into prison. They both had dreams they couldn't understand. Joseph, still holding on to his own dream, offered to interpret theirs. He told the cupbearer that he'd be restored to Pharaoh's court. And the baker, not so lucky, he'd be executed. And that's exactly what happened. Joseph asked the cupbearer to remember him and mention him to Pharaoh. But when the cupbearer got out, he forgot. 2 more years passed. 2 long, quiet years. But then Pharaoh had a dream, actually 2 dreams. Strange, vivid, unsettling. None of his magicians or wise men could explain them. And that's when the cupbearer finally remembered Joseph. Joseph was rushed out of prison, shaved, and brought before Pharaoh. Pharaoh described his dreams: 7 fat cows swallowed by 7 skinny cows, 7 healthy heads of grain devoured by 7 thin, scorched ones. Joseph listened, and then, humbly, he said, "I can't interpret dreams, but God can." Joseph explained that the dreams were a warning. Egypt would have 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of severe famine. And then Joseph did something bold. He gave Pharaoh a plan: store grain during the good years, so Egypt could survive the bad ones. Pharaoh was impressed. He saw wisdom, leadership, and divine favor in Joseph. So he did something unthinkable. He made Joseph second in command over all of Egypt. Joseph went from prisoner to prime minister, just like that. He was 30 years old, and over the next 7 years, he stored up massive amounts of grain, just as he'd advised. Then came the famine. And just like Joseph said, it hit hard. Back in Canaan, Joseph's family was starving. Jacob sent 10 of his sons to Egypt to buy food. Everyone except Benjamin, Joseph's younger brother. When they arrived, they bowed before the Egyptian ruler, not realizing it was Joseph. Joseph recognized them, but they didn't recognize him. Think about that moment. The last time Joseph saw these men, they were selling him as a slave. Now they were kneeling before him, just like the dream he had all those years ago. Joseph didn't reveal himself right away. Instead, he tested them. He wanted to see if their hearts had changed. He accused them of being spies. He kept one brother, Simeon, in prison and told them to return with Benjamin. Eventually, they did. When Joseph saw Benjamin, he was overwhelmed, but he wasn't ready yet. He set a final test. He framed Benjamin for theft to see if the others would abandon him like they abandoned Joseph. But this time, they didn't. Judah, one of the brothers who once plotted against Joseph, offered to take Benjamin's place as a slave. That's when Joseph broke. He sent everyone else out, and through tears he said, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" The brothers were stunned, terrified. But Joseph didn't seek revenge. He said something that still echoes today. "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good, to save many lives." He embraced them. He wept with them. He forgave them. And then he sent for his father. Jacob, who thought his son was dead, was reunited with him in Egypt. So what do we take from Joseph's story? That God's plans are bigger than our pain. That delays aren't denials, and detours can still lead to destiny. Joseph's life reminds us that even in betrayal, God is preparing. Even in the prison, God is positioning. And even when others try to break you, God can still bless you. Joseph never stopped trusting. And when the time was right, when the character had been forged and the dream had matured, God lifted him up. Joseph lived to see his children's children. And on his deathbed, surrounded by his brothers and their descendants, he spoke with clarity. God will surely come to your aid and bring you out of this land to the land he promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He made them swear, "When that day comes, take my bones with you." Joseph died at 110 years old. Egypt embalmed him, and his body was placed in a coffin, waiting for the promise, the reclaiming of the promised land. And at the appointed time, the Israelites left Egypt carrying silver, gold, and the bones of Joseph. Yes, Joseph's bones. He never lived to see the Exodus, but his faith did. His coffin was not a symbol of death, but of promise, a reminder that no matter how long the night, God keeps His word. And so it was. From the pit to the palace, from slavery to sovereignty. Joseph's story didn't end with reconciliation. It echoed for centuries, guiding generations. He forgave what most would never forget. He dreamed when others despaired. And he believed, even in death, that God would come through. He didn't just save his family. He kept alive the hope of a nation. And that hope would walk out of Egypt into the wilderness on its way to a promised land. Because the God of Joseph is always writing a greater story. So if your life feels stuck in the pit or the prison, don't give up. The palace might be closer than you think. Thanks for watching. If this story encouraged you, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs hope. And join us next time as we explore more unforgettable stories from the Bible. Until then, remember, even when life turns against you, God is still turning it for good. What would you have done if you were in Joseph's shoes? Comment below.